All right, Sue, you want to get started?
I sure do. Thanks, Mackenzie. Wow, it's great to see such a crowd here today. Just a note, if you're to everybody participating, you have to actually set default to all panelists. You'll want to choose all panelists and attendees, and that way everybody can see you're welcome and where you're from. So make sure you find that drop-down menu in the to button of the chat to say all panelists and attendees. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and share with you some morning welcomes and the introduction to our summit today. So quick introduction. My name is Sue Hardin, and I am have been a longtime member of the UDL IRN Board of Directors and work with the IRN regularly on issues and related to professional learning and implementation. I am a recently retired assistive technology consultant out of Michigan, and I continue to work in the field of universal design for learning, doing implementation support in many districts in Michigan and with the IRN. And I'd like to just welcome you all here today to the, Mackenzie tells me, 7th annual Summit on Demand, or Summit. This is our first Summit on Demand. So we really have a shift in the way that we're the same. It's just as engaging. It's just as connected as we have in our traditional summits, but this time we're doing it when it's convenient for you and bringing lots of friends together that we really haven't been able to bring together before. So we're really excited about today and how this will roll out and perhaps how it'll have an effect in the future. So we start with this exciting news. We have over 1,000 attendees joining us today. For us, this is double what we typically have in person. So we know that making it available in a remote way means we can have friends and colleagues come from across the country. Many more people are able to attend than could attend if we had to all travel. So in life as with this conference as well, there are silver linings to things that happen outside of our control. And one of ours today is that we were able to have so many of you join us for this session. In fact, we have a huge international audience. We have participants from Australia and Canada and Germany and Ireland and Japan and New Zealand and Northern Ireland, Norway, Singapore, the US and Uruguay. Mackenzie, did we get any last minute international attendees that I should mention?
I think we had one join us from Brazil, and then I'm not sure, but there might be a couple of other floating countries out there that I might have forgotten, but it's a good list.
Yeah, so if we missed you or missed where you're at, and we have many people from the US as well. I think we have, oh, I'm gonna go back. I think we have about 28 states represented. So if you could just take a minute and share in the chat, if you haven't yet, where you're from and what you're interested in learning about related to universal design for learning. If you see somebody that you haven't met before, go ahead and send them a personal chat too. This is really our opportunity to get connected. So remember, if you're in the chat, next to the to line, you'd use the drop-down menu, and that sends all of your comments to all panelists and participants alike, so we can all see who's here with us today. So we want to say thank you to our 98 presenters who will be sharing content with you over the course of this week and beyond, all through November. We have 65 hours of content total. Some of that is delivered in a synchronous way, and some of that will be asynchronous, but all of it in the end will be available asynchronously. So if you can't get to everything today, don't worry. You'll have an opportunity to see the recorded sessions of those events and be able to catch up on all the hours. This is another silver lining of doing it digitally. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a conference and said, oh, two of my favorite sessions both at the same time, and I just can't be there for both of them. So this way you get an opportunity to come in and find the ones that are of interest to you specifically, and you can see them over and over again. So that you can really digest the learning and really grow from it. So we have two kinds of presentation types that I want to mention today. I kind of alluded to both of those just a moment ago. The first are synchronous, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how those work. So when you go in, you obviously all got your link to the content and your code for getting in. Save that, don't lose that email. That will get you in and out of the event through the course of this week and again on through November. When you get in, go to the top navigation button and choose live links. You'll see the live talks for today only. So you won't see day two's live talks until tomorrow. So once you get in, you can see here's a screenshot of the welcome that you're attending right now. If you were to scroll down the page, you'd see the rest of those live talks for the day. I just want to point out, this is one of our live sessions today at 1 o'clock with Louis Lord Nelson and Mindy Johnson. And when you get to the session that you're hoping to attend, you'll click the big blue button that says join the live session. You'll also note that there are on this page interactive notes. So we invite you to work with your colleagues to take notes on the session, jot down things that are of interest to you that you find will highlight the information that's shared. And you also have access to the handout. So you can click on that link and take some resources back with you. And those are synchronous events. You'll see that this live schedule will change again daily. This is at the very welcome page of the summit site. So that again will change, but this is nice to see a little dashboard of what's coming for the day. The asynchronous sessions are organized a little bit differently. So we head back to the website and you'll see that again on the top navigation, you'll use the link that says digital breakouts. When you click on that link, you'll see that all the strands are listed. So you can look at these sessions via a strand. I have the K-12 strand illustrated in this screenshot, and you can see that all of the K-12 sessions are listed. You click inside each of the boxes of the tiles and you can learn more about the session and then actually access the resources. There also is an opportunity to see all the strands. So if I clicked at the very top of that drop-down menu, I can go to all strands, and this is a nice way to do a search. So if you're looking for a particular presenter or a particular session, and you can type it in our search and it will bring you directly to the session that you're hoping to attend. As I mentioned, this is our welcome screen on the Summit On Demand website. There's a nice welcome from Jamie Basham. If you hadn't had a chance to hear that yet, you might want to jump in and hear what this summit's all about. Sort of sets the stage for what we're going to be doing over the course of the week. And you'll actually have a chance to hear from Jamie this morning as well, or today as well, in this very session. I didn't mean to say this morning, but some of you, it might be midnight. I'm not sure. So we want to make sure we're welcoming our international colleagues. Also on this very front page, you can get access to the full schedule. So if you're someone who would like to print out the session so you can have it handy, there's a nice tidy PDF that Mackenzie's made available to us. Also in the center of this screen on the bottom, you'll see the participants guide. Participants guide is very important piece of literature that will help you get through the conference. I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail in the next slide. And then you'll also see on the right-hand side our Twitter feed, and then the button for the evaluation. We do always appreciate your feedback, so we will be asking for your input at the end of the 5 days and beyond. So here's the participant guide. You also receive this in your confirmation email. Here's a link to a tiny URL if you want to get it, and you can always get it in the welcome page. but it's a handy guide that gives us information about how to interact with the summit on demand. It gives you information about the Zoom room tips and tricks. It gives you information about live captioning. So if you are in need of live captioning, you just click on the controls at the bottom of your screen and you can turn on the closed captioning. um, you can also use the participant guide to understand a little bit more about navigating and understanding the schedule. And also if hopefully, fingers crossed, nobody's going to need this, but if you have need some help or some technical support, we have a link for helping with that as well. So take a minute to dive into that guide, and it will really help you navigate your way through the summit, because we know just for some of you, this may be a whole brand new way of attending a conference. And so we wanted to put together some support to make that an easy transition for you. And just a reminder, we all love this to be social here at the IRN. So if you are attending something and you want to share some information you've discovered, a resource that really stood out to you, something brilliant that someone says, please use our hashtag UDLIRN and share what you're learning. It will all be displayed on our homepage, and you'll see probably get lots of nice new followers who are interested in universal design for learning. It's really our opportunity to grow our field and to get our voices out. So I encourage you to share what you're learning, invite colleagues in to have conversations, and we'll use our Twitter feed to enhance that. And so, like with all good conferences, many hands went into making this happen. First, I would like to recognize our UDL IRN engagement manager, Mackenzie Nicholas. Most of you probably have interacted with Mackenzie over the course of getting prepared for this Summit on Demand. She is instrumental in making this whole session, the whole week work, the whole month work, and quite honestly, the whole IRN work. So thank you, Mackenzie, for your magic once again. Somehow you turned in something that was scary and uncertain into 1,000 welcoming voices here to talk about universal design for learning. So thank you. We also have a wonderful summit committee that we would be remiss without saying thank you to as well. They join us at least monthly, and sometimes when we get to the end, weekly. They give us our voice about how the summit should look, what we should be thinking about as we're designing it. They really are the N in the IRN, our network. They really help us put together an event that meets the needs of all of our constituents. We have members on our summit committee from state agencies, from local agencies, from higher ed, from researchers, from implementers. So we really try to pull in a broad field of our people from our field, our broad representation, so that we can provide for you what you need in order to understand, learn, and grow in universal design for learning. We also want to thank our advisory board. We have an ongoing board that meets annually and then some, and they keep us informed again across the field about the mission of the IRN, what we should be doing, and how we move forward. And so we thank them for their service and helping us again meet your needs. We also have a whole slew of awesome volunteers who've helped put on today. So you'll see them in the monitoring in the sessions as you attend. Many of them work behind the scenes and have helped bring together today's events and tomorrow's events as well. So thank you to our volunteers. We couldn't do it without you. And then, of course, thanks to the IRN and CAST staff and our board of directors who, again, are doing much of the work behind the scenes. You'll meet some of them through the course of our time together, and many of them have put in countless hours, including Mackenzie and Brian Dean, who's the man behind what you'll see on the website and in the technology that you'll be using to access the content today. So thank you all. Again, many hands make this great work. We also need to say thank you to our sponsors. We have lots of partners in this work who come from the field of educational technology, as well as design and architecture, so and educators as well. So we're proud to have many of those supporters joining us in this event through the course of the week. And thank you. And now I'm going to invite Dr. Jamie Basham in for a conversation. Jamie is the co-founder of the UDL IRN, and he is the Senior Director of Learning and Innovation at CAST and a professor at the University of Kansas. And Jamie is a very busy man, as you can probably tell by his title. So Jamie, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll just have a conversation.
Okay, that sounds good, Sue. I'm just amazed. I'm watching all these comments go by, and I'm just amazed by both old friends and some new folks coming in, and from all around the world. It's just incredible, and to hear the numbers that we have is absolutely incredible.
Absolutely, it is a good day. So Jamie, I'd just love to hear, as we're getting started this morning, we've all been experiencing a variety of degrees of having to stay at home. And I'd love to hear how your family has been dealing with the safer at home orders, and just give us a little update on what you and your family have been doing during the last few months.
Well, probably like most families, staying at home. I mean, we've redefined the new normal for people who kind of have watched the opening little welcome video. I think it's pretty indicative of kind of what's going on across the globe. Kids are at home. My wife, Laura's at home. For those who don't know, Laura's a school district administrator. So she's been dealing with the K-12 side of trying to get a bunch of kids online and helping support, first of all, the immediate sort of shift to continuous learning, and now working towards the overall sort of redesign and reopening, reentry of K-12. And so she's actually in the room right outside my room here, working on that as we speak, planning to actually watch this session, I think, later here today when she gets a minute. And then, of course, the kids have doing the kid things. We're home based in Lawrence, Kansas, although I usually don't spend much time here. I've spent more time, I think, here in Lawrence or at home this last 2 months, more time at home than I've spent probably over the last 15 years at home. So that's kind of a silver lining for me a little bit. But in the States, Kansas was one of the first states to quickly go into continuous learning and kind of call off the rest of the school year. And so they had great sort of foresight to put together an executive planning council. And so they quickly went into planning for that and supported that. And our local district, I think, even had a website up mid-January for thinking about what this could potentially do. So I think they've been out front of this, but it gave our kids the opportunity to stay in continuous learning. And obviously, like many other K-12 units and higher education units across the country, I'm sure there's multiple lessons learned throughout the last couple months.
Well, that actually is a perfect lead in for my next question. So, but first, let me just say I'm glad that that things are going well in Kansas, and that the kids have found a way to continue their learning. I think that's such a challenge. Many kids, particularly middle schoolers and high schoolers, are challenged by that distance learning. So it's wonderful to hear that your kids are growing and learning. But I'm wondering what you could share with us. What have you been hearing from the field, whether it's K-12 or higher education, about the barriers that educators are facing during this remote learning, and maybe some of the solutions that they've stumbled upon or designed for, I should say?
We started dealing with this, I think many of us in the UDL community, at least people I've been working with, as I said, we started thinking about this probably mid-January is when we started getting word out. I remember I got stuck I was in Washington, D.C. for some meetings and got stuck there over a weekend because of snow here in the Midwest, United States. And I know that weekend, my email started getting clouded, bombarded with, potential issues that were going to start impacting not only folks in the United States, but beyond. And so what we started thinking about, and so what we started doing then is thinking about it as we do in UDL, like what are some of the barriers, right? And what makes UDL different from, I think, other sort of design frameworks is that we don't think about, what's just going on in the classroom. We think about, the barriers across the system. So when we look at, whether it's a barrier of a decision that was made at a district level or state level, or a technology barrier from an accessibility stance, or how it's being utilized in planning, et cetera. And so some of the things that we started learning very early on and kind of dealing with were issues of, simply having access to technology, right? I mean, some of the basic ones were access to technology. And so we started thinking about that, but then what immediately hit everyone across, I think, the globe and at least, multiple places I worked with in the United States and a few beyond, was the need for basic primary needs being met. How do we get food to people, right? So if the schools are sort of the frontline bureaucrats, the frontline system for supporting some of the basics, such as providing food to students, and in some cases in families, how does that kind of continue as we enter those ages? So I've been on multiple groups that have been working through different solutions. I've seen multiple districts and multiple school organizational entities kind of work together as a community to support that. And these are some of the things that we haven't thought about, right? We haven't thought about that at such a systems level. And so these are some of the basic barriers that have emerged. And then, like I said, then once we started thinking about the primary needs, social emotional development, we started thinking about the food, we started doing that. Then it's how do we deal with the technology aspects? And I think we've obviously run into a lot of barriers around that. And there's been a lot of solutions that have popped up, from enabling Wi-Fi to distributing computers. I worked with I was on a meeting where we worked with a district that was, a district that was, redistributing all the technology that they had in their, across all their buildings to the families that needed it. And I think many schools started doing that. And then how do we use things like this that were, banned maybe before all this was going on in schools, but yet phones became critically important. Mobile became critically important as we started to support continuous learning. And so all these things were just absolute potential barriers that started to emerge. And as we do in the UDL community, we think about, how do we support learning? How do we support access? How do we support building of understanding? How do we then support more the deeper understanding and the internalization of what we need to bring forth expert learning, right? And then how do we do that using multiple means of engagement, representation, action, expression? And so we go through that sort of design thinking process, if you would, using the UDL framework, and it's the same here as it was before the pandemic. It's just that the pandemic offers new challenges as we think about some of those things that we're dealing with. So I don't know if Sue's still here. These are the occasions where you think you're happy that Mackenzie moved, so you know you're not the one frozen.
You're not frozen, Jamie.
Sue, are you still with us? Another challenge, obviously, that we've all witnessed is what we're witnessing now, right? The ability that Wi-Fi and bandwidth sort of things. So, these are all challenges that we're dealing with. And yeah, I'm noticing some of the comments here about remote rural sort of areas that are dealing with Wi-Fi access and dealing with other sort of issues. And I'm hoping that what we've all learned from the remote issues and not having access to online is something that now we have to step up, and some countries have already done this, to start looking at the feasibility or need to look at Wi-Fi access as a utility or something that is as needed. So these are some of the things that we're starting to deal with. And I think we're looking at those at larger systems sort of levels. So welcome back, Sue.
Thank you. Talk about technology issues. Nothing like getting booted off right in the middle of a question. But we'll manage. So Grace, you were great, very graceful, Jamie, and continued on. So obviously we've been hard hit here in the US. You know, we don't often think about that this pandemic, of course, is a pandemic for a reason. We call it that because it's across the globe. Can you tell us what you've been hearing internationally about UDL and education, and how this pandemic may be shifting the way we think about teaching and learning?
Yeah, I mean, even the numbers in the US are absolutely incredible. I was dealing with this, like I said, we've been dealing with it for a while. In the US alone, I mean, we just think about the numbers, right? 48 out of 50 states have canceled school for the rest of the year. Roughly 57 million, I think it's 56.6 million or something like that, students were directly impacted at the K-12 level, and are out of school as we know it in a face-to-face sort of setting, and it really happened overnight. But then when we look at it from a global level, at its highest peak, UNESCO was reporting that 1.6 billion students, 1.6 billion students from 193 countries were rapidly taken out of face-to-face environments. That means that roughly 91%, 92% of the global population of students were out of school. And so when we think about this at the level that's global, we think about the need for redesigning the education system, right? I mean, we have multiple lessons learned, as we just talked about a bunch of them. And there's many more flipping through in the chat and such. You know, we've known the education system hasn't worked for a long time. And what this pandemic has shown us is that, you know, we need to start stepping up and redesigning from the ground up, and really thinking about what our next generation of learners actually needs, and how do we actually design for that. I would argue that our system needs to be redesigned from the ground up with learners in mind, at the very center for how we design. That's the variables, right? And within that, we have to recognize that variability within each and every one of those learners needs to be dealt with at the level of design. And so I think the big questions relate to how do we do that? You know, multiple states across the US have adopted UDL. Multiple countries have also adopted UDL as a primary framework. And UNESCO has it built into many of their sort of initiatives that they have going on throughout multiple countries. USAID has adopted it in the work they're doing across the globe. So as we think about this redesign process, we have to design with both universal design and universal design for learning at the very core foundation for how we think about this. And I think this pandemic has given impetus for district leaders, for parents, for teachers, for students themselves to step up and start saying, look, this isn't working. It's not working for what we've done in the past. And we need to really step up and really think about what it means to design for all learners from the very beginning, and design for that variability. And that's really what we need to aim for. That's really what we need to aim for.
So Jamie, it makes me, reminds me of our friend and the UDL IRN's co-founder, your partner in the foundation of the IRN, Jeff Diedrich. He always talked about wanting to blow up education, and that the only way to fix it was to blow it up first and then rebuild it. And, you know, it dawned on me, maybe we're here. Maybe this pandemic has blown up education, and we're in a place now to rebuild. You know, thinking about it from a systems level too, and thinking about what are those components that need to go together, because we can't just change it at classroom, we got to change the whole thing. And so maybe it's our time. So that's a great lead into, in any disaster, in any catastrophe, there's often a silver lining. And so could you just share with us from your perspective, what silver linings are you seeing in education and in UDL? And what are you hoping that we take away with us from this disruption, that we continue practices that maybe we put in place for remote learning, but we continue now into whatever our new education system looks like?
Well, I mean, generally, we've said one of them, right, which is that we need to really start bringing forth UDL as a primary framework. I mean, that's just one of them. As we think about silver linings, it makes me also think about the idea that we need to start thinking about things like the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to think broader about the economy, right? So one of the things that we've seen in this country, and many other countries have seen the same thing, where your economy is definitely hit and been drastically impacted by COVID, and we need to think about that piece of it. For instance, we've known for a long time that socioeconomic status as a whole has directly been correlated with outcomes in the education system. Poverty as a whole has been directly correlated with outcomes in the education system. And so we have to think about that. One of the other silver linings in this, and this is probably not going to make a bunch of people happy, but this gave opportunity for many school systems to say, that end of the year assessment that we've all had to take, we're not taking it this year. And it's opened up new ways for thinking about how do we measure learning. And I think it's critically important for us to continue that conversation, because I would argue, as I think many others have, my colleague Young Zhao and others here at KU, Mike Waymeyer and others have said, for a long time, that the way we measure education has created its own inequities. And so we have to think about those inequities that are bringing forth, and then how they pass down or pass up, depending how we look at it throughout the lifespan. I mean, many of the social inequities, racial inequities that we're dealing with, in fact, that's all over the broadcast media and what's going on across the US right now, and has actually spread throughout the globe. And the racial tensions we're dealing with are representative of a system that's not equitable for all people. And, I believe that this really starts with a foundational redesign of the education system. And so while we have hundreds of thousands of people already that have died, and we have millions of people that have been affected, and countless families and individuals, billions of people that have been directly impacted by this, it does provide some silver linings for us to reopen those conversations around what does it mean to be an education system in the modern age, and what does it mean to be a learner in the modern age, and how do we approach that? So I think there are multiple silver linings that we can think about. That. I would also say that it's provided a way to support more personalization, that we think about each individual student and their needs, because I know many education systems that we've worked with at CAST and throughout the UDL IRN, I'm guessing many other UDL sort of organizations and folks that have been on the front lines of supporting schools and universities as they take on the new work of reentry or reopening. As they've done this, they've started dealing with things at an individual level. And so what we've also learned is that we can do that, but we have to do it through a new way of thinking of how we teach, and before how we teach, how we design, how we plan, and how we assess, and then what technologies we use to do that. And I think the things that were impossible to us a couple months ago are no longer impossible to us. And I think that says something. And I think we have to carry that forward as we redesign the education system, not only in the US, but across the globe. We just have to rethink what it means to be educated. And I believe that at the end of the day, that UDL is going to, one, be a primary framework for foundationally principling the design of that education system. But overall, we as the education community have to carry that forward. We as a community have to carry that forward.
Yeah, I think two things I'm going to reflect on what you said is that that the impossible became possible, and we have to, I think that's so important. We have to remember that, because we all often hear that, well, you just couldn't do that. It couldn't happen, but we did. We made it happen because we had to. And I think we need to make sure we carry that forward. And the second thing is that it's incumbent on us. So we have 114 people listening right now, and we have 900 others who are going to be listening soon. And I really think it is our responsibility to not let this go. Let's not go back to the old ways. Let's not just open up the doors and just do it the way we used to. And for God's sake, let's not go backwards, because I've seen some of that slide happen too, and that inclination to lock kids in and make the world smaller instead of bigger. So I think we do have to, as a community, come together. And I think you started it out this way, Jamie. Think about the kids at the center. That really has to be what we're designing for, and not for the system, for the system's sake, but for the kids. So I'm going to leave you with one final question. For many of us joining today, this is a whole brand new way of learning. Can you just give us one or two tips that you think we could put in our pockets for the best way to take advantage of what's offered over the next couple weeks and then through the next few months?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just actually received a message here from Brian, and I think Brian Dean sent a message earlier that to highlight the chat, and I think that's important. We have a chat functionality, so if you are in the site and you have questions, there's probably someone standing by for you, and so hit the chat. There's also an accessibility button. I believe it's on the left side that can help with some accessibility needs. So those are a couple things. But one of the things I would do, I guess, if I were approaching this, as many of us have probably already attended some online sort of events, is go through the schedule and kind of figure out what are the things I want to be there live for the live events, and what are some of the things that can wait till later. Obviously, you have to intermix that with your own schedule. Because many of us are still working the 10 or 12 hours a day on Zoom that we do in the new world. So do that. But the other thing I want to highlight is something that I think is critically important, which is the social aspects of kind of what we're doing. And I believe we have some social events kind of set up that you can kind of look at. And I would not just throw those out. I would look at those and say, hey, look, we're part of a community. We want to grow a community here. And while we're online, it's the same thing as we do face-to-face. As our face-to-face event is very social, very active. And of course, you can always be a person that doesn't want to be social and not participate, and that's fine too. Variability is at the heart of how we design. So, but I would encourage people to look at the things that engage them and go to those things. And then, by the way, one of the nice things about this on-demand sort of summit is that it's active through November, as you kind of pointed out, and I think was pointed out earlier. So you might have colleagues in another district or even another state or wherever, or another country, and you say, hey, gosh, I'm going to this great summit. It started today. Unlike the face-to-face event that we're up and running for a period of time, and then we all kind of go back to our sort of own little cubbies of the world. This is something that's going to be ongoing. And we're still open for business. So if people want to join us later on, a month, 2 months down the line, and say, hey, there's something here for me, they can do that. And by the way, I heard rumor of this, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything, so I might get in trouble, but we'll see what Mackenzie's face looks like after I say this, but that we're going to be adding new content to this. And the plan is to not stop on Friday with the live content, but that everyone here has exclusive access through November. And we plan to add, and have exclusive events that are added into this summit experience throughout November. And so that's the plan, right? The last thing I'll say, and I think it was already kind of pointed out at some point, that we have so many people. We have over 1,000 people. We have over 1,000 participants that are registered to come over the next few days. Many people are probably new to UDL. And there is a UDL self-paced sort of module you can go to in Learning Designed, which Learning Designed is a platform that we created with the field over the last 5 years to support field engagement, field growth, and understanding across UDL across the globe with micro-credentials and all those sort of things. But the thing I want to highlight here is that it's a place for collaboration. It's a place for free resources. And one of those free resources is a self-paced module that can take you through some of the basics of UDL. And so if someone can maybe throw that in the chat, and I think it's going to be highlighted elsewhere throughout the summit experience. But you know, if you have someone that's asking questions like, what is this thing? I don't quite understand UDL. I would encourage folks to go through that module. It's a free module. It's been free. It will be free, and it's outside in the Learning Design platform. So it's always free for people. And as then you're a school administrator and you're thinking about, well, gosh, I wish I had a bunch of people that understood UDL. Then we could start talking about credentials and such, and having, you know, competency-based micro credentials that are in there. But that's another conversation. But I would look at those free options. Those free, that 101 is a basic overview of UDL.
Yeah, Jamie, thanks for the reminder about Learning Design. It really is, even if you're not new to UDL, if you're a veteran, there's lots of great resources around UDL in Learning Design as well. So if you haven't been and you don't have an account, hop on, sign up. It's free to access all the resources. So definitely take a look at that. Jamie,
Yeah, and the other thing I guess I would say too is, as I'm looking at all these wonderful names go by, I see some real superstars in there in multiple areas. Reach out to people. Don't be shy. You know, on Twitter, in chat, whatever. Reach out, participate. And we were designed. I mean, UDL IRN, the Implementation of Research Network, the UDL Implementation of Research Network was, in reality, simply put, we were designed to, we were brought forth to kind of break down all the silos in the education system and truly build a student-centered network of individuals from across, you know, researchers, educators, education leaders, people in academia. I mean, you know, industry folks. We were designed to bring forth an education system that busted down the silos and allowed people to interact with one another around one thing, which is designing future-ready learning environments that were equitable and designed for all individuals. And that was our sole purpose 10 years ago of coming together as a small group, and now has grown over multiple continents of people. But that was our sole purpose. So I would not be shy in reaching out to folks and you know, and saying, hey, I'd like some help here. Can you meet with me, or you have a conversation with me? That's what we're here to do. And just like it is in a face-to-face sort of environment, you know, we'd like to do the same here.
Thanks, Jamie. We have a question from a participant in the chat. Maria wants to hear your opinion on how hard do you think it is to make this migration to UDL? How hard will it be to move from our current education system to the new UDL framework, or the UDL framework?
So, you know, that's a great question. And there's not a real good answer. And that's actually the problem with it a little bit, right? It's contextualized based on the situation. You know, as we have implemented in multiple organizations and across multiple states, regions, countries, districts, what we generally know is it takes about 3 to 5 years to go through a full-on implementation. I mean, it's closely linked to both improvement science, from a stance that we're contextualizing design based on the needs of the environment, but also implemented through implementation science, and looking at the process of implementation through that framework. And anyone that's ever known that and ever has looked at that, it's a 3 to 5 year process. It's not a switch that you throw overnight. Although what we have heard and what we've kind of witnessed is that, and I probably should have brought this up in the first question, I guess, second question, but that many of the places that has started with UDL that have already been in the throes of it found the transition to sort of a continuous learning, remote learning, whatever, emergency distance learning. They found it a lot easier because they were having the conversations very early on about what are some of the barriers we're facing and how do we overcome those barriers. And in fact, across the United States, every state kind of came up with some form of a continuous learning plan or continuous education plan. And of last count, which we're monitoring all those, which we can share that URL out for folks. About 12 states, I believe, is it 12 states that have implemented and said UDL is a core structure for that. But it's not something that's going to be done overnight. It's not going to be something that's done overnight. It is a 3 to 5 year transition, but it depends on what is contextualized. And the interesting thing here, folks, and if you've ever attended one of our summits before, you've learned that it's going on in places. Sub-Saharan Africa is in the midst of implementation, right? As well as places throughout the globe. Singapore has a large contingency of folks here that are in the midst of implementation. A lot of good work going on in Canada, a lot of good work going on, obviously, across the United States, across the EU. There's lots of great stuff going on in Australia and New Zealand. So it can be done in multiple environments, but it is not like something that you flip a switch and you're going to fix everything overnight.
Thanks, Jamie. And, it occurs to me too, that just to mention that the CAST and UDL IRN are working collaboratively on school implementation and certification that will help guide making that transition a little easier. So that's in the works, and we're looking at beta coming out quite soon. So that would be another tool resource to consider using as you're trying to make that shift happen.
Yeah, I'm seeing now questions pop up. I'm kind of keeping an eye on about higher education. And I guess we probably haven't spent enough time talking about that. One of my many hats, obviously, is a professor in the School of Ed, actually in the Department of Special Education at the University of Kansas. Obviously, while we've talked a lot about K-12, really the COVID has hit and impacted all of education from K-12 through post-secondary, higher education, even for that matter, and some of the work that we've been doing at Castor, even on the post-secondary end, is even in the workforce development and even corporate sort of preparation, corporate trainings. So it's directly impacted that. And so the ways that we're thinking about in higher education and where UDL plays a role is, again, the same process that we use, but overcoming the barriers in the education system in higher education, obviously deal with making sure that we have accessibility, right? But what we've learned very rapidly and what we've known for a long time is there's many professors, many folks that have not taught online. And when we rapidly made the shift online, it wasn't that great. And so what we need to do is really retrain the academics of the world, my colleagues, to make sure that they're prepared to teach in online settings. And as we think about going forward in higher education, we need to also think about, and thanks for sharing the UDL and higher education link there, UDL on campus. We have to think about how do we move to a system that seamlessly flows between online and face-to-face, so that when we have to go through something like this again, be it this fall or be it next spring, that we're prepared for it and that we've designed for it. But we also have to rethink the higher education system as a whole. And our colleague Todd Rose, who is formerly at CAST but is at Harvard, has really kind of written about this. And how do we make multiple pathways available at the university level where people can actually personalize their university experience a little bit more through overcoming some of the issues and boundaries we have with the Carnegie unit, and thinking more about competency-based credentials on top of and/or alongside the Carnegie unit, how those micro credentials play a role in associated with credit hours. So we can get into this whole long conversation around higher education. And we have a group that, we have multiple special interest groups. We call them SIGs in the UDL IRN. And one of the more active SIGs that we have is the higher education SIG. And the team there, it just does an absolutely wonderful job at engaging folks across the higher education community. I think there's multiple hundreds of people within that SIG that meet on a regular basis to support that. So the UDL Higher Education Network really supports a lot of growth, development, understanding in there. And Eric Moore and the team, are doing really great sort of work in supporting work in this area. So if you're a higher education person, I would definitely think about supporting that. Jody and Jennifer and the team, Eric, are just doing a phenomenal job at supporting this kind of work. And they have upcoming meetings. I think later this summer, August, if I recall correctly, is their next meeting. But reach out to those folks and look into those sort of things. There's also some great podcasts out there that talk about this very thing, not only K-12 higher education, but then also higher education, or not only K-12, but higher education as a whole.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm glad you mentioned our SIGs. We do have special interest groups for the IRN to address many topics, including implementation and professional learning. So check those out. We're always looking for new people to join us. So if one of those really interests you, please make sure you reach out to our SIG leaders and let them know you'd like to get involved.
And more SIGs, by the way. If you're in a group and you're saying, hey, I'd like to get a group together that's thinking about, space design, which we have a large group that's doing space design work on interior, exterior, architectural sort of design. We have groups on STEM. If you're wanting to bring a group together to get together once a month, or not even once a month, but once in a while, to talk about some of the bigger issues and just to socialize and to bring forth that initiative, I'd encourage you to reach out. Drop it in the chat and say, hey, get in touch with me, or reach out to Mackenzie, reach out to any of us, and we'll help get that up and going. And we have this infrastructure for doing that.
Great, thanks, Jamie. We only have a few minutes left. We have about, I have a few more minutes of housekeeping to finish up, maybe about 2 minutes. So why don't you leave us, Jamie, with some parting thoughts, and then we'll do our final housekeeping and thank everybody for joining us today.
Well, as I said in the opening, I just really hope, in the little welcome thing I did with the kids interrupting me, I really hope that everyone kind of is inspired by the time they leave, right? And that they use the Summit website as a resource for not only what you're going to do over the next week, but for what you're going to take on over the next year and beyond. We have some phenomenal presenters that have transformed their face-to-face talks into online talks. Then we've gone through and we've identified people throughout the UDL community and beyond that can really help support, really think about reentry and reopening the education system, whether it's K-12 or higher education. These folks are resources for you. And I would really find those resources and put them in a back pocket somewhere. Because what you're going to find in the summit, as you do with any sort of professional learning opportunity you have, is there are some things that are going to hit you and say, my gosh, I wish I would have had that two days ago. I needed that and I need it now. But there's also going to be a number of things that you might not know you need until 6 months down the line. So, find those resources, catalog those resources, share resources. We really hope that we bring together a larger community of people that are really focused on redesigning the education system from the ground up, that can really be inspired to do that and have the resources to do that. And then also on top of that, I really hope that folks can just have a great summit experience. They just have a wonderful summer experience. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about how we can support you in that process.
Great, thanks, Jamie. We got lots of nice comments in the chat about how much people appreciated hearing your thoughts. I think it's really important that you were able to take the time today to share with people, what are the leaders in our field thinking about in terms of universal design for learning. And so we all appreciate you sharing with us and bringing your personal viewpoint to the work that we're all passionate about. So just to close us out for this session, just a reminder that we do want to get social. So if you haven't had a chance yet, jump into hashtag UDLIRN. I already saw many of them fly by this morning. So feel free to share tidbits that you've gathered already or things that you're excited about learning or sessions you're planning to attend. And then one more time, thank you to our sponsors, to our volunteers, to our CAST staff and IRN staff members, to our summit committee for making this possible. And finally, please go and enjoy learning. We look forward to connecting with you throughout the week, but don't let it stop there. Join us. Come and be a part of our SIG, part of our IRN. Make sure you're getting our newsletter. We want to stay connected and continue sharing beyond this week. So thank you all, and everyone have a great learning experience.
Bye.